Street runs along what was once an old railway line. Now over there, that fine building was once the Harcourt Street railway station. In 2003, when the new tram lines were being laid, our reporter Alistair Jackson spoke to people who had lived and worked close to that old railway line.
In the early 50s, Harcourt Street station was still very busy, but times were changing fast, and the end of 1958 would see the end of the Harcourt Street line too. Then no one thought resurrection was possible, but it was. And on part of the line, it has already happened. The Luas is doing regular test runs on the new track near its Sandyford base, and all along the line, that reinstalment work is continuing. Brian Mac Aongusa has had a passionate interest in railways and in railway policy through the years. For him, the Harcourt Street line's demise and resurrection has a particular fascination.
The Harcourt Street line was closed for two reasons. Primarily because it was losing money, but a secondary reason was that by closing a Dublin line like the Harcourt Street one, it would be politically feasible to close many other lines throughout the country, lines which were also losing money.
Some of these people know each other, some of them don't. All of them have one thing in common. All were once regular travellers on the Harcourt Street line. And now they're about to have another experience together. A trip on the Luas. Carmel Rogan was a teenager in the 50s. Then she'd very close ties indeed to the old line. Her father was the station master at Fox Rock. Since then, Fox Rock has changed a great deal.
That was the old line to Bray. And it continued on the other side to Harcourt Street. And the station house was where those houses are now.
Carmel lived in the station house, so she was right in the centre of things.
The station house was a bit grim in those days because, but at the same time there were a lot of people coming in and talking, and then we had the Leopardstown races, and it was exciting in a way.
It certainly must have been exciting. When the races were on, over 3,000 people a day were carried out to them on race specials. And when they arrived, safety seems to have been entirely forgotten in the rush to get onto the course. Apart from the racegoers, Fox Rock had its regular commuters. One of them was Samuel Beckett, and he described the view from the station in one of his early novels.
And so they stayed a little while, Mr. Case and Mr. Nolan looking at Mr. Gorman, and Mr. Gorman looking straight before him, at nothing in particular, though the sky falling to the hills and the hills falling to the plain made as pretty a picture in the early morning light as a man could hope to meet with in a day's march.
Charles Meredith and his father before him lived in Fox Rock and worked as solicitors in Dublin. Charles remembers with some envy his father's lifestyle.
He would get up in the morning fairly leisurely, walk up to Fox Rock Station and get the 9:40 train to Dublin. And he'd walk down from Harcourt Street to his office in Molesworth Street, put in his leisurely day, and then in the evening he'd leave his office about 10 to 5, walk up to Harcourt Street and get the 5:15 train home. As I say, spacious days.
In the 50s, Jim Dowling travelled daily from Dundrum. At first he travelled to school, then later to university. Between Stillorgan and Dundrum, there was a considerable drop.
It was quite a steep gradient for a train, and very often it didn't stop in time. It ran through the station and out on the bridge over the old Dundrum Road. I remember one occasion when that happened, an old lady on the platform said, "He must be only learning."
As a teenager, Jerry Donnelly fell in love with trains. Then he lived near the line at Milltown.
I used to get official approval to travel on the footplate, and which is always an exciting event when you're a young lad. And particularly interesting was that at night, if it was late, engines were going back light to Bray, the lads used to slow up at the end of my road so I could drop off over the wall and home. It was a great service, fantastic.
Sean O'Canada worked as a fireman on the Harcourt Street line. One of the regular passengers was a fishmonger whose basket travelled in the guard's van.
And when we'd arrive at Harcourt Street, the driver would say to me, "Go down there, Sam." He called me Sam. He said, "Go down there, Sam, and give her a hand to get the thing out of the van." And when I go down to the van, we'd lift the thing out, and she would have a few herrings there, and she'd give it to myself and this particular driver.
And on a steam train, you had a ready-made cooker with a shovel as a frying pan.
Put them into the firebox for about 3 or 4 seconds, pull them out, turn them back in again for another few seconds, and then we'd eat them for our breakfast.
Jim Kernan was a driver on the old line. He says driving a steam train was an art. Then you had to plan ahead to have enough power for the steeper gradients. He doesn't look back to those days through rose-tinted glasses.
My memories of the Harcourt Street line and of steam locomotives in general was plenty of hard work for very little money.
From Stillorgan, the gradient was all downhill to Harcourt Street. In 1900, that gradient was responsible for a spectacular accident, although Brian Mac Aongusa has found an intriguing alternative explanation centred on the bridge across the canal just before Harcourt Street Station.
At this very point on the canal, there was a ferry raft, which had to be removed when the canal was built. And drivers on the old Harcourt Street line, when they were coming in trains across here, had the custom of blowing the whistle so as not to disturb the ferries in the raft. On one occasion, when a heavy cattle train in 1900 was coming in from Enniscorthy, the driver was so preoccupied with trying to stop his train that he did not blow the whistle, with disastrous results.
Now time has brought us full circle. By next June, this line will once again be carrying passengers. But the old line has set a few standards for the new one.
The fastest train went from Bray to Harcourt Street with one stop at Ranelagh in 20 minutes. And the evening fastest train ran non-stop from Harcourt Street to Stillorgan in 12 minutes. And I defy anyone to travel from Dublin to Stillorgan in 12 minutes in this day and age, despite all the progress we believe we have made.
It's a challenge the Luas may take up, but for the moment it's still unrolling itself along the track of that old Harcourt Street line, and in the process blending the old with the new.
And the book, Harcourt Street Line, Back on Track by Brian Mac Aongusa, is available from your local library.